Sweetheart,
What?
would you like my assistance on making dinner?
No.
Why? I would love to assist you on making dinner.
I'm good.
Let me help
I'm
you.
good.
Sweetheart,
What?
would you like me to help you with the dishes?
No, I'm
I
good.
will assist you.
I'm good, thank you.
Please let me help you.
No.
Alright. Sweetheart. Sweetheart. Hey, honey, I'm trying to get your answer me there. What are you doing? What is this? Help!
What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Had to go cheap with the outfit this time. I bought too many pop figures. The wife's had enough. No, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. My most anticipated review in quite some time. This is a spoiler-free review. So, we're going to talk plot points loosely, but not a spoiler in sight. Do not worry. So I need you guys in the comments down below. What is your anticipation like for this movie? And if you like this review and you want to see more Batman videos this week, be sure to drop your thumbs up, and we have a very special announcement later on in the video. We'll get to that. Let's talk about the Batman. So when the Riddler, a sadistic serial killer, begins murdering key political figures in Gotham, Batman is forced to investigate the city's hidden corruption and question his family's involvement. That's the summary on IMDb, I promise. Like we have been doing lately, I want to start out with the rating of this movie. It is PG-13 for strong, violent, and disturbing content, drug content, strong language, and some suggestive material. There are moments where I could see younger kids getting scared in this film, so a stronger PG-13 for sure. Not quite R, but it's close. This film is directed by Matt Reeves, the director of the final two Planet of the Apes movies, one of my favorite trilogies from the 2010s, and I was excited to see him bring that sort of flavor to the Batman universe. But obviously, going into this film, we're all thinking to ourselves, okay, it's David Fincher's Seven. In the Batman universe, the Riddler's kind of like the Zodiac Killer. It's a 3-hour murder mystery detective story, at least that's what I wanted it to be. And my first thought walking out of that theater was to compare this movie to a movie like Seven and a movie like Zodiac. I'm a huge fan of those slower-paced thrillers. A film like Prisoners is one of my favorites of all time. And funny enough, in that movie, you have Paul Dano giving a very different, but at the same time, similar, unhinged performance like he does in this film. And even though it all starts and ends with the Batman himself, Robert Pattinson, the Riddler's presence in this movie is very similar to the presence of insert serial killer here that we've seen before in one of those classic thrillers. It's so crazy to me because there aren't very many interactions between, and I'm talking physically, Batman and the Riddler in this movie. But there are so many mind games being played thinking back on the film. I feel like there were those moments, even though there technically weren't very many moments of that vein. And the movie being able to convey that to us is really cool. And honestly, that's what I wanted to see most from the Batman. So one of Batman's classic comic stories, and one of my personal favorites that they did an animated movie about just recently, a two-parter, is The Long Halloween. And there were a lot of rumors that they were going to take that story, work it in a way, change it up a bit, and include it in this movie. And while the story itself is different, there are definitely similarities there. One thing I love about this movie that I didn't know was going to be an inclusion was kind of that voiceover at the beginning from Bruce Wayne himself, talking about Gotham, how things have changed over the years, and the fact that Batman represents so much more than what it feels like on its surface. The fact that Batman is the shadows. Criminals will be constantly looking for the Batman in places that he isn't in. He can't be everywhere at once, right? But criminals don't know that. So the fear that he instills in Gotham, both in the criminal underworld and Gotham in its entirety, is really impressively showcased in this movie. And if Matt Reeves was going to get a point across, I believe that's the best point he was able to get across about this character. Batman represents fear. he is vengeance. We see that in the trailer. But there's also a character arc for Batman himself here. I say Batman over Bruce Wayne because what this movie does, something I was hoping it would do, is show us way more Batman than Bruce Wayne. And when Bruce Wayne is being Bruce Wayne, is not wearing the mask, there's a bit of uncertainty there. He's not as confident as he is when he is the Batman because that's who he truly is. Well, Bruce is the mask, but the Batman mask is Bruce. This is the first time I've ever felt that in a Batman movie, right? We've seen shades of it before, and trust me, some of these other Batman films are some of my favorite movies ever, but the Batman is the first time I've seen that represented in live action. I said, they really got that right. And if there's one thing you take home with you, it's that point. And while Bruce isn't in the movie as much as Batman, there is a story arc there with this character in its entirety that I did not expect at all, and one that made me a bit more emotional than maybe even I anticipated. So that was unexpected, as well as the relationship between he and Commissioner Gordon. Jeffrey Wright is incredible in this movie, and he actually has way more screen time than I anticipated. Instead of Gordon being relegated to the background as that sort of character, it's more like this dynamic duo, not a Batman and Robin, a Batman and a
Commissioner Gordon. Commissioner.
But Wright's performance, he crushes it in this movie. And I'm going to go ahead and say it, not just because of the screen time. This is the best Batman-Gordon live-action relationship I've ever seen. It is absolutely everything I needed it to be, and his character's presence is awesome. And of course, you have Alfred. Cannot forget about Andy Serkis. Now, I do have a criticism with Alfred's character, but when we actually get that screen time and get that showcasing of the relationship, I thought it was beautiful, and I really love the emotion there, especially the emotion showcased from Robert Pattinson. So Serkis crushes it, as does our villainous characters. Let's talk about Colin Farrell as the Penguin. Maybe more screen time than I anticipated, but the energy he had in this movie, not only the prosthetics, not only Colin Farrell being amazing, he put so much into the character of the Penguin, but Penguin is not the only crime boss in this movie. Someone like a Carmine Falcone. You have the presence of Maroni. All of these different factions of Gotham taking shape, and it leads me to believe that they could pull off a handful of HBO Max series that they are leading towards. But the detail, I mean, Matt Reeves brings us so much in terms of Gotham. Almost as a character, Gotham comes to life in a way that we've seen shades of before in other movies, but it's just handled so differently. Again, it feels like Gotham from the comics. I won't say which comics and which stories they're pulling from. Some of it is obvious, but the character of Falcone had much more of a presence, as much of a presence as a Penguin. And John Turturro plays him expertly. Like, I didn't know I needed John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, but he was awesome. Also, Farrell's Penguin, while different, it does feel Arkham-esque, and that's what I wanted from the Penguin. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, smooth, often ruthless, goes against the grain a handful of times in this movie, and really what I wanted from the character of Catwoman. Her chemistry with Pattinson is really great in this film. That's one thing I was really worried about because you knew they would showcase that relationship, and they did, but they had to have chemistry. They do have chemistry. A handful of fight scenes that she's involved in, really well done. Overall, Matt Reeves handles action in this movie really well. I mean, the choreography is good. The camera movements, they work extremely well, trying to showcase us that action. The action is brutal. It's scary at points. I mentioned in the beginning, this could, in a way, be looked at as a bit of a horror movie. Much more thriller than horror, but less action, right? More so those other genres. The action is present in this film, especially in the third act. But my favorite moments in this movie are when Batman is playing detective, or when Batman is going up against the Riddler, a less physical villain, obviously, but one that challenges Batman up here as opposed to with his fists. We understand the brutality with this character because that's given to us at the beginning and at the end. But all throughout the middle of the movie, Batman is being tested mentally. Let's talk about the cinematography and just the overall look of the film. It's rare that we get that pop of color in this movie, but when we get it, it shines bright. The fact that the movie mostly takes place with the Batman, so you're going to have a lot of scenes at night, it prevents it from doing anything crazy. So the movie is darker as a whole, but again, I do think it fits this character. The weapons and gadgets as he has been given, it's not as origin-y as something like Batman Begins, so you don't really see where all of these things came from, but it's Batman. We've seen it 1,000 times. We can assume. Also, have to talk about the production design side of things. Wayne Manor, the Batcave. I wanted more Batcave, to be honest with you. When we are there, it looks cool. I just didn't get enough of it. But Wayne Manor is something that I think, it has this gothic look and feel to it. Just every place associated with the Waynes feels very Batman-y and feels very comic booky. And I just, again, so much detail. It kind of feels like the animated series in a way. The score, Michael Giacchino. This might be my favorite Batman score. Just whenever the score kicks in, down to Batman putting on his eye makeup, I'm like, that's just everything that I wanted from this character. Fading in and out at the beginning with our first look at Batman, it's one of the coolest intro scenes or combination of scenes that I've ever seen in a Batman film. And overall, obviously, the focus is going to be on Pattinson and the Cowl facing this overarching riddle and a lot of these crime bosses. There's so much going on at once, but the focus always remains on Pattinson, who I thought, it's too early to say anything definitive, but I will say that his interpretation of the character is really great. It is not the outgoing playboy-y Bruce Wayne that we've seen in other movies. This Bruce Wayne doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne. He wants to be Batman, and you can feel that with the command of his voice and all of these very specific things he's doing, his tech from his grappling hook, and I loved him using his grappling hook, my God, to a couple of unexpected things that allow him to work on this mystery much easier. Batman has all of the toys, and that is showcased well in this very long film. And obviously at 3 hours, I think a lot of people are going to struggle there, especially when there was less action than I anticipated. Again, I wanted to see Batman as a detective. People will look at it being a 7 type of movie and say that's a bad thing. There were a couple at our screening that said that was a bad thing before the movie started. Then when the movie ended, he decided to shout out his thoughts on the film, and they were very negative. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a press screening. Why not be more professional? If you didn't like the film, that's fine. Don't scream it out when the credits aren't even finished going. If this was a fan screening, sure, it's a press screening. You were a lot older than me. I don't know who you are. But next time, just be more professional. All right? Sorry, y'all. Not because I disagree with him, just the way he went about the entire thing. But I do want to hit on some of the negatives that I have with the movie really quick. The overarching riddle itself, it's fascinating, but it may not entirely come together as easily as it seems. This is definitely something that I need to soak in more upon rewatch because it's very complex, but there were things about it that I think will play either really well or not as good upon rewatch. Also, I mentioned Alfred. There was a negative. Austin, what is it? Well, I just needed more of Alfred. Alfred is not in the film near as much as he needed to be with the arc that is happening with that character. I expected there to be some sort of conclusion with that storyline, and there just wasn't. So I was definitely missing that, especially with a 3-hour runtime. The third act of this film, okay, this is going to be a big talking point. It goes bigger, but not often better. It gets a little heavy on wanting to broaden its horizons, and while there isn't a lot of CGI in the film, there's definitely more CGI in the third act than the first two, even if it does look good. Now, this is just comparing it to the first two acts, which were so grounded and so realistic, and the third act is still that, just less so. Oftentimes with a film like this, you want the third act to be your favorite of the film, and it wasn't my favorite. Did it take away from what I loved about the movie? No, it did not, but there were one or two things that I questioned as I was watching them, and again, I just need to know how that plays the second time around. Do I need to see this movie again? Yes. It's time to score this film. But before I do that, I love doing these super quick. I have a lot of Batman pop figures over here. One special edition pop figure of Batman in his wingsuit. Just like we did with Dune, I'm going to be giving this one away. All you have to do, comment where you think this will rank in the Batman filmography. Be sure to drop your thumbs up. If you are a subscriber, you are in the running for this pop figure. Let's do it. But the Batman is epic. Pattinson's grasp of this character is apparent from the first scene, and Reeves builds a layered mystery around him. There are thrills throughout, but the quiet moments stand out. Giacchino's masterful score cements this as one of the best Batman movies yet. My score is a 95%, a 9.5 out of 10. Easily the best movie of this year. Where does it rank in the Batman filmography? Stay tuned. I will also be ranking the Batman actors. So if you're not subscribed, if you don't have that notification bell turned on, this is not the only video. I'm going to save spoilers for a bit later in the week, but there is so much. Oh my God. There's a lot to talk about. All right, guys, you're the best. Thanks for tuning in, staying, watching, and I'll see you very soon.
Sweetheart.
Buddy.